He's the man behind the mask, an anthropologist, anarchist, and organizer who planned and then helped carry out the Occupy Wall Street protests. David Graeber is the subject of the cover story in the new issue of Bloomberg Businessweek magazine's Drake Bennett joins us. That was Drake, not David, who we just showed you there. But we do have a picture of the man that you have profiled here, David Graeber. Who is he?
Well, he's a really interesting figure. I mean, to the extent that anyone can be a central figure in this movement that's been pretty adamantly non-hierarchical, he is that. He's an anthropologist whose work on debt has been debt, I mean, obviously is an issue that's pretty central for a lot of the people in the Occupy Wall Street movement. And he's also, though, been involved in an incredibly direct way. He was one of a very small group of activists who really has been there from the beginning and planned what has become this very, very big but still kind of amorphous movement.
He's an author as well, a former professor. He wrote a book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years. I mean, how much science is behind the slogan?
Well, it's a really interesting book. There's a lot in there, but I think one of the more interesting and pertinent arguments he makes is about the way we think about debt today. We tend to ascribe a kind of moral significance to it, and he looks kind of throughout history, going back to medieval and ancient times, and finds that there didn't used to be this kind of moral attachment to it. It used to be considered one of many obligations people had, and there was more of a willingness to forgive debts. So you'd see these things like debt jubilees in the ancient world, where basically all debts were forgiven. And the reason is because these rulers knew that if they didn't do that, there'd be these incredibly disruptive peasant riots when people got too much in debt. So Graeber would kind of like to see something like that now, some kind of a debt forgiveness.
And in your profile here, you said he was there in the beginning days, but he's since sort of stepped away from the movement. To what degree is he still guiding them?
Very little, and I think he would, be the first to admit that, no one's really, there's no kind of man behind the curtain here. The reason he was an interesting person to write about is that he was there from kind of the embryonic stages, and I feel like for me this was the Zuccotti Park occupation, Occupy Wall Street, was something that kind of I only became aware of when it was a few weeks old. So it was interesting to sort of go back to before it started, 5, 6 weeks before, when people were just trying to think about what this might look like.
I love your opening line. You say, David Graeber likes to say he had 3 goals for the year: promote his book, learn to drive, and launch a worldwide revolution. Is that the ultimate aim, a revolution?
For him, it is. I mean, he is an anarchist. Not everyone in the movement is, and there's a lot of different factions in there. But for him, he speaks non-ironically about kind of changing the way we, sort of getting rid of the state, changing the way the capitalist system works. These very big, sweeping, radical goals.
It's in the latest issue of Businessweek, and is there anything involving Guy Fawkes there, or are just some of the protesters wearing those masks? Is there something symbolic? It's
become sort of an iconic image down there. It sort of was originally attached to one faction within it, but I think it sort of represents, there's a certain idea there, at least in anarchist organizing, that, for anonymity, sort of anything that any one of us does, we're all accountable for, so we should be kind of faceless in a way. So, I mean, that's sort of what's behind it a little bit.
All right, Drake. Great piece. Thanks for joining us.